All right, thanks, guys. So my name is Kirk Anderson. I'm the EVP of Sales here at Snapfulfil. Just a little bit of background about myself. I've been in warehouse management software systems, Tier 1 solutions for the past 18 years. Engineering background, went into product development, level 2 product support at Tier 1 solution, Manhattan Associates, if you know of them. Was with them for about 10 years. And did account management and account executive sales. I made the switch into cloud warehouse management systems about 4 years ago, which is my current provider, Snapfulfil. Synergy Logistics is our company name, which we're listed on Gartner's Magic Quadrant as one of the best WMS solutions in the marketplace. But Snapfulfil is our true WMS name, and we've gone to market since about 2007. And been in the marketplace for about 10 years. Just a little bit of background before I give over to Don to introduce himself. Snapfulfil is a cloud-based warehouse management solution, Tier 1 based. Can support warehouses that 5,000 square foot up to 1 million square feet. We haven't actually had a customer go over 1 million square feet yet, but very close. One of the customers that Mike had mentioned earlier today during his presentation also uses Snapfulfil to support their high volume e-commerce growth. So with Shippo, we've got about 5 customers that utilize our solution. How we use Shippo is to extend the carrier integrations that we don't have native to our base solution. So those solutions, carriers that are either regional or like Nugistics or R. Donnelley or Ascendia, as you go into the international space. We don't want to be in the space of developing and building carrier integrations. We would rather leave that up to our partner, Shippo, to do. Snapfulfil is a SaaS-based solution, so software as a subscription, all-inclusive package, which includes software, hardware, implementation services, training, ongoing support and maintenance, delivered via just a 12-month agreement. So it's a warehouse in a box and one throat to choke. It's us. We're providing everything for a WMS provider, or sorry, a parcel shipper to utilize our solution in the marketplace. So I'll give it over here to Don to talk about his background. Oh, you've got it.
I do have a lapel mic, and first of all, I did want to say that if you'll notice, my head is actually the right size for my body. So the headshot there is a little disconcerting when it came up. I appreciate the laughs there. One of the other things is you'd be surprised how many you heard Kirk talk about what a WMS does, and one of the reasons that we felt the need to do that is lots of questions about what does a warehouse management system actually do? And it's the 4 walls, right? Receiving, inspection, put away, pick, pack, ship, right? Returns, processing, stuff like that. My background is I'm an operations guy. In about 2007, I jumped the shark or went to the other team and moved to tech. One of the reasons that becomes valuable for our customers is that in addition to selling a warehouse management system, someone like me pairs up with Kirk as a salesperson. We come in and we start optimizing operations, right? Now, it's full disclosure is that I'm an agent of Snapfulfil, so when I make a recommendation, it's swinging folks into what will make our application work best. Does that make sense? But in order to do that, and this is one of the things that as individual business owners and distributors, when you're partnering with a vendor, one of the things that they're bringing is the experience of having dug into and examined operations for hundreds of warehouses, right? And closed deals usually indicate our best of breed features matched their best of breed willingness to change processes, right? So that's what we'll be talking about today. Some of the things we've learned. Like I said, I come out of an operations background, and that's everything from managing parts on a nuclear submarine out of Pearl Harbor to working on internal process changes at a company like Dematic, which is automated material handling at the hundreds of $1 million scales across networks. Amazon's one of, which is prevalent here, but Amazon's one of Dematic's customers, right, as far as automated material handling. So I've run the gambit, right? I could throw out some of the company names there, from Red Prairie to GT Nexus, which is now an Infor company. SmartTurn, one of the first SaaS WMS in 2007, 2008. So we're going to talk a little bit about operations here. It's high level because until you get someone with experience or a consultant in there to actually take a look at your facility, these are all guide rules, or they're all thumb rules, right? Things to think about. Process improvement is hard. The thing that I'll be continually bringing up is the change management side, because that's the hard part, right? People can do math and make processes better, but building teams and being dedicated to change and making your workforce be resilient, getting them ready for that change is the hard part, right? So from there, go ahead, Kirk.
All right, so for kind of the high-level agenda for today, actually, I know it's a small stage up here.
And I'm upstaging him, right?
Yeah,
So.
we have to move around here, but and I appreciate everybody joining us today. I know it's right after lunch, and we're competing against a robot in the next room, which, as I'm told, we actually have a bigger group in here than in the robot room, so it's quite interesting. So. What we're going to be covering today is, like Don said, kind of more the team approach, the processes around operational overview, and then diving into some of the physical layout. For the four walls of the warehouse: people, process, product, and place, so the 4 Ps. What we're going to focus today on is really the people, setting up the team. Actually, go down to the next slide. So setting up the team and the, oops, go back up one, sorry.
Thanks. We're really coordinated, folks.
Yeah, the clicker is, yeah, there we go. So selecting a team. The team is very important for an operational event within the warehouse, making sure you have the right team members. And then moving into how do we deploy that team? What are some of the quick wins? How do we go through selecting kind of your top 3, next 3 operational improvements? And then care and feeding of an operation once you've gone through these operational improvements so that you can continue forward and still gain momentum as you're optimizing. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Don to go through the initial process of building a team.
Sure, and I don't need that. So we'll go over here and there you go. Roles, strengths, and time, right? Who do you have in your warehouse? What roles are they going to fulfill? Understand that a change management or an optimization team usually requires a couple things. One of those is thinking about matrix management, because now I'm pulling people out of their normal job and I'm creating a new team with a new leader. So organizationally, as leaders, start thinking about the reporting and goal setting and measurement and who's responsible for, corrective action and progress and all that other stuff. We'll talk about that a little later. But remember picking teams at recess, right? And when we were kids and we're out there trying to figure out how to play basketball or soccer or kickball or whatnot, and you're usually picking the most, you start with the most athletic that also happens to be a buddy, that kind of thing. Not too much different here, right? You need a team leader, and then below that you'll see initiative leaders. One of the things about a team leader is that think of them as a project manager, right? That type of skill set, critical thinking, understand the value of planning and timelines and commitments they've made to the executive team, for instance. Initiative leaders are the next level below. At any given time, that optimization team will be running 2 or 3 different initiatives, right? So if you start thinking in your head, we're already talking about 3 or 4 people. If you're in a small facility, adjust these and people will just wear different hats. I think we've had it explained to us, and I do work for a technology company, someone who can crunch data, right? Someone who can go get a report, someone who's proficient in Excel, 1 or 2 folks, because one of the things that you'll need to do, and later on we'll also talk about this, is prove out a change, right? Before someone's going to throw a significant pebble into your pond of operations, they want to understand what the actual ramification is going to be, right? What's the risk versus gain there? Process analysts, if you have critical thinkers that are used to thinking about picking as a set of interstitial steps, right? Those are the kinds of folks you'd want to include here. Folks who are watching work, and what they're not necessarily worried about is how fast a person's going. They're looking at it as, how is that person doing their job? What steps are involved? You'll need some of that in here. SMEs, right? Subject matter experts. These folks are important. There's some notes over here that say, beware of the SME that believes they own the process. Because our doers, the folks out there doing the work, get value in your organization by mastering a process and giving you value. And what we're actually doing is moving their cheese, right? So be thoughtful about those folks and including them, because they're going to bring some of the influence that you'll need, right? Folks that are ambitious and critical and lateral thinkers. We'll talk a little bit later about how do you set rules for that team to help you innovate. Selecting an approach, and if, I'm going to ask for raising hands here. Lean Six Sigma green belt, yellow belt, black belt guys? Anybody? Theory of constraints. Total quality leadership, total quality management, any of that stuff. Process reengineering. All right. What happens is, in our facilities, there are folks that have been exposed to all of those and more. And an organization, and what's in vogue today, is to do things like say, we're a lean organization with an understanding that what you've implied is we follow Lean Six Sigma practices to achieve changes in processes. Not everyone has that, right? Black belts are running at $100,000, $115,000, $120,000 a year to come in and run large operations. But what do you have? Right? That's the thing to be thoughtful of. Folks that have TQM, total quality management experience from a decade ago, right? Folks that have read the theory of constraints and understand that process. So figure out what skills you have, and then hybridize that model to help your organization change, right? Other things you can do in here, right? For instance, a couple of years ago, I went and got my certified Scrum Master certification, right? An employer sent me. Totally different way to think about work. 2-day investment of time, and you come out certified if you pass the test, which it's a pump, not a filter, so it's fine. Let me see here, speed and timeline, right? One of the things about the hand you're dealt is who do you have and how much time do you have to accomplish that change? So as leaders and managers, one of the things we have to understand is when's the best time to begin a change, right? Is it in October when it's supposed to be a 5-week change and peak starts in the middle of November, right? High risk there, you may not want to start doing that. So be thoughtful about that. Administrative overhead, something to consider is that we're already taking folks that are almost fully utilized because they're our best and brightest, right? And now we're adding on change management and process reengineering. The last thing that I usually tell folks that you want to do is add another 4 or 6 hours of work and reporting on top of that. Right? So as leaders, figure out what the information you need is and hold them accountable for that. But creating another half FTE worth of work to present you a report probably may not be the best investment. So, and then, what does delivery look like? Right? One of the things that's hardest about change management and process optimization is figuring out what the end state is, because it's not that it's a guess because you can calculate, it's that calculation usually has some weight of success or probability against it, right? First thing, let's start from the top, is change is hard. We're going to get into some of the optimization stuff, and as a warehouseman and an operations manager, what you'll have to do. But the first thing to recognize here is, when I start this team, how do I get them going? At the very top is small, quick changes and do them quickly. One of the things we have to do is establish a reputation that when that team accepts a project or an improvement, then that improvement gets done. So examples here are perforated paper stock to rip off a ticket, where today they would have to hold it against the end of a desk and pull it, right? Goofy things that as you're walking around and you're a manager, people say, it wouldn't be so much more convenient if. And for us, it's cheap. It doesn't require a lot of IT bandwidth. It doesn't require a lot of time investment, right? Other examples I've seen, mobile printers, right? Wi-Fi enabled printers that the person can grab with them and take them, instead of having to do a transaction, walk to a printer and bring it back, right? Maybe 800, 900 bucks per unit. You buy 5 of them, problem solved, right? But now your team gets to claim that improvement. That's going to help when you get onto the harder, bigger stuff where you're asking people to switch responsibilities, right? And trust that you're going to give them more productivity even though you're changing their job description, right? See here that charter for change, that's executive advocacy, right? People need to understand that your change team has a mandate to go and improve processes and work with you as a team, but that's their role, right? And they have executive sponsorship. You'll see that helps a little bit later with matrix management. And then relieve them of tradition and budget. Right? People can't innovate if you're creating rules that say we have, use the term sacred cows in the warehouse, right? There are processes that you cannot touch. If that's true for you, let people know up front so it's not considered. Budget is something else interesting, right? Is like we say relieve folks of budget. We're actually saying anything more than $5,000, I need at least a quarter to budget for, or 6 months. Anything over 15,000, then we need to roll it out to the end of the fiscal year and plan for it. Those are the types of things I mean. Right? Discern resistance versus critical thinking. People don't want to change, but that's different than a smart person asking you a tough question. So as a leader, that's one of the things is we get invested in improving a process, and any challenge, whether we start seeing it as resistance. If it's really a good process change, you will be able to prove it out with math. Make sense? And prepare for the nuts and bolts of change. You can buy the books. There's a book that I still read and reread called Management at the Speed of Change. Don't remember the author right now, but that'll give you some of the nuts and bolts, right? The preparatory meetings, the discussions with your leadership team, the discussions with department heads and process owners, and get those folks ready. There's a term that I want you to remember called resilience, and it's how ready is your team for change? How much can they absorb and adopt, right? So that's how you increase resilience, is preparatory meetings and discussions and getting ownership and all that other good stuff. So where do we start? And for this, I think I'm giving that back to Kirk.
Yeah, that's true. So where do we start? We have the team in place now. Where do we go from here? Setting in motion the specific approach that the team has outlined. So just quick wins and the edges. Quick wins, just like Don had mentioned, kind of the perforated sheets, changing out printers, taking a look at a printer at a pack station. If it's printing low, does it need a firmware update, or do I need to swap out that printer? Just small, quick wins that allow your team to start to provide for those operational improvements. Those don't really need the full ROI analysis. You just need to start putting some things in action in order to start to receive some of those results. Start at the edges, receiving and shipping. So receiving is the expected input into the warehouse, as well as shipping is the expected output. So ensuring that what solutions you have in place, as well as PO receipts, that the exact inventory that's supposed to be in the warehouse is being received properly. Has it been over-received, under-received, the wrong product received? Typically, like a solution like ours catches those mistakes because there's no room for error. You have to receive the right product into the warehouse. Similarly, on the outbound side, shipping, QCing everything, making sure what was picked in the pick process is actually going out in the right box. 100% QC validation and integration with the Shippo and shipping solution for printing shipping labels will help to ensure that your shipments are going out with 100% order fulfillment and accuracy. And then start kind of going inward from there. What are the next steps in the process? So from receiving in the inbound side, there's put away. How do I put away in the warehouse? Are my team just putting away willy-nilly into any open slot, or is there actually rules-based grouping around where does this go in the warehouse based on item mix, slots, batches, expiration dates? How do I go about my put-away facility? Inventory management, taking a look at the overall inventory management, transfers within the warehouse, cycle counting. Do you do a cycle count once a year, or can you do that more quarterly so that you can get away from annual audits? That's where optimization comes in place. And similarly, on the outbound side, replenishment of your pick faces. So if you fall below a bin minimum requirement, automatically top that bin face up so that your pickers aren't going out to an empty location when it comes time to pick. Picking, are you picking via paper? Are you doing one order at a time? Batch picking, process of picking multiple orders so that you can go through the warehouse in the most efficient pick path possible. These are all areas that you start taking a look at and following a data process and analyzing how is best operational in my warehouse. Using a consulting firm to do that, but also as far as your team that you've just selected, that's where we get the biggest bang for our buck. Taking a look at daisy chain thinking. So this is, I know that we've kind of worked from the edges and worked back towards the middle, but ensuring that every item that you're looking at, so let's say you're looking at picking, that what is the output of picking as going into packing? So what you do in picking isn't overly affecting what's going on in packing, because that's the next input to the next process. So together, if you're trying to optimize picking and packing together, you may increase picking, but you might decrease packing just not significantly. So overall, the overall process of those two are looked at together. And then finally, start looking at your top 3, or at least contenders, top 3, next 3 of your big operational improvements and changes. These can be, like us, putting in a WMS solution, putting in material handling equipment, looking at shipping optimization, and what carriers you want to use to get better rates. These are where your team are really going to put together the best recommendations for optimization within the warehouse. Physical layout considerations. Now, everybody in the room will have a different warehouse, different product profile, so that's kind of the reason why I prefaced at the beginning of our conversation around people and process versus product and place. But we can give you some general overviews of our 40 years in business together as far as operational experience that is some best practices. So, it seems like a no-brainer, but match the flow of goods to your process. Not everybody will have a standard operating procedure, and that's really what your team is there to create and build. But taking a look at it, make sure that your team is following a process that you've outlined. Incorporating value-added service earlier. I think we had lunch with some gentlemen at Caffeine and Kilo, and I think I see him in the back there. Value-added service of creating gift boxes, or adding a card, or doing an inscription on a particular label that needs to go into a box. What we find when we go into warehouses is that value-add service area is located in the far corner of the warehouse. We always go, why is it located there? There's a lot of inputs that go into that particular location and an output, which is a finished good. Why aren't you putting that closer to where your constraints are, which are your kits, the components that are going into that kit process for fulfillment on the backside? So making sure that you're evaluating that area smartly. Staging and inventory rest areas. Every time you touch a product, you're adding labor to it. You're adding touches. That's cost to the overall product fulfillment. Shippo's conference here is shipping. Evaluating the process of being competitive with your shipping, but you also need to be competitive with your fulfillment. The fulfillment process is really where you're going to separate yourself from the Amazons of the world, because you can do it cheaper, better, faster, which is the goal. Zoning is strategic, slotting is tactical. Zoning of your warehouse, it's pretty open as far as bulk receiving, rework area, kitting, picking, packing. These are the areas that you put around the warehouse, and you, as part of your analysis of your warehouse, where do I put these strategic zones? And then within those zones, you have the tactical slots, those bins. So in a picking area, your fast movers, you want to locate those closest to your pack stations so that those are going out the warehouse the fastest, not on the other side of the warehouse near your receiving area. Understanding how each process scales designed for peak. I think during Mike's conversation earlier this morning, he was mentioning about service levels and service level agreements. Everybody's on this Amazon Prime model. So if you have a next day shipment for free, you want to be able to make sure that you're able to scale during peak in order to manage those service level agreements. Optimized and efficient warehouse should be pull items to fulfillment. So this really kind of goes to the end of the process, having shipping be the fastest process within your warehouse. That's going to pull everything that's before it into line so that your overview of a fast and efficient operation. So doing a one pass through your warehouse, all areas, optimizing as best as possible, then going back and hitting shipping specifically so that is the fastest process. And I know that's one reason why you're here today. Go through the Shippo conference and understand how Shippo can make you faster. And then remembering to be relieved of tradition. As Don said, always the killer of businesses is this is how we've always done it. Well, your team is there so that you don't repeat mistakes that you've done in the past. And if you can relieve them of that tradition and budget, then they're allowed to really be creative and brainstorm about how to optimize your warehouse. So how do we prepare for the change? Setting the change stage for that next step in the plan. And I'll give it back to Don.
Hey guys, thanks. Hey, where's the clicker? Right there. Give me the clicker. So we're going to jump a little bit more into how do you actually optimize a process. here in a second. And just a time check, folks, you only have to listen to about 8 more minutes of this, and then we'll open it for questions. Different observation types. One of the things that teams get stuck doing is they'll lock themselves in a room and they'll do a value chain or a process, but they don't do the other types, right? Which is go out and compare your standard operating procedure against what people actually do, or do plot out the physical movement of goods process and then plot out the data and the translation and all of the information requirements there as well, because those two things need to be in sync. What you'll end up finding are there may be data requirements that are outdated, or a process step may be collecting data that could be done earlier and in an automated fashion, right? So process improvement doesn't always just have to be, am I slotting right so the travel time is less? It can also be, is there a step occurring in this operation that can be done earlier or even later, right? Later is a little harder. The most complex discrete steps get the most observation, right? That ties into if you have labor standards. One of the things that we get asked commonly is, do you measure productivity? And the answer is, yeah, I can tell you that someone shipped out or picked 624 lines over the course of 8 hours. That's a productivity measure. The labor standard, right, are the steps that go into how that person picked it, and they're recursive. So when we say look at the most complex step, what we're saying is that within a picking operation or a packing operation or put away or receiving, pay attention to the steps that take the people the longest, because that's where you end up getting the most labor savings and optimization, right? An example may be, just a technology reference is today when I scan a barcode during receipt with my current WMS, it always returns back the ability to receive things in eaches. So now whenever that person wants to receive a case of something, they have to understand how many eaches are in that case instead of me having a system that will allow them to scan a case and understand what the each conversion is, right? Those types of things, an investment in technology or asking the vendor to label with the number of eaches, those kinds of things are important. You'll find some labor savings there. And what I should say is when we talk about optimizing, this is interesting. When an organization transitions from paper-based, receipt, put away, packing, printing out movement orders and labels, and paper picking, the second they go into RF, and this is important if you're ever evaluating vendors, you'll get 25% improvement across the board the second we remove paper. And that is people looking up and down at the paper goes away. Right? And RF direction says go to location B15, and then instead of them looking, and the locations are printed out of order, and they have to decide and all that other good stuff. So, but after that, the next big jump for warehousing is buying robots, and not like those kind. I mean, big sorters and twirly birds and all that other great stuff, right? Shipping chutes. In between, every improvement you make is about improving what the people are doing within the process, and they're incremental. Right? If I save someone a half a second on a pick, but over the course of a year, 8 people are saving 50,000 half seconds, right? You can start doing the math and say that's where the labor savings come from, right? So if you do that across every operation and you save a second in every operation, every recursive step, right? That's where you start seeing the labor savings. You'll see here we talk a little bit about, on the next slide, talk about ROI and what to do with it. But clearly defined changes to process, changes to data. That means these folks are sitting in a room and they're brainstorming. They've gone out, they've done the observations. We as leaders, it's almost like if you were a startup that's going out and trying to get capital. Those folks are seeking the money and the organizational will to make that change. So they're trying to convince leaders, right? So on the note here, I say speculation isn't the same thing as calculation. Force your team to bring you things and prove them out. Right? It's the reasonable doubt because it really is a guess. But if you've picked the right team, their job is to convince you. Here's our top 3. Here's the one we want to go after. Here's the business case or justification. Right? This is a project treated like one. I talked about overhead, administrative overhead. Now we're talking about project management. Organizationally, you have to make a choice. Right? You can be a group of 5 or 6 people. That doesn't mean that you can't use an Excel spreadsheet and give yourself a timeline, right? Or milestones and gates. And work toward that. Momentum, right? A little bit, 80% of failed change is attributed to lack of resiliency. We talked about that. The workforce is not adaptable to change enough to adopt. right? And so you end up having to pull back. And then fatigue. If you guys have, raise your hand if you've worked in a change management process before that have been part of that team, right? There's a few of you. It's pushing rocks uphill, right? Because it's not just the willingness for an organization to change, but it's individual people that have gotten used to specific tasks and convincing them your way is better. It's even worse if, like me, every time I've taken one of those gigs, I've been the new guy also, right? So now I get to come in, I've just got the newfangled ideas, like let's buy new software because it's awesome and will make you better. So start with small, quick wins. Make sure that you're marketing and reporting against this stuff, right? When you adopt a change, accomplish it, measure it, put that out to people. You have to that team needs to keep validity and credibility, and the only way they do that is by marketing wins, right? This is a traditional one. I always try to bring this up. More work versus different work. When you're optimizing a process, people are going to do different things. And when they adopt that change, they're going to perceive it as harder than the thing they were used to. So that's the argument, is more work versus different work. And you have to have convincing people on your side that understand the math versus the convenience and the amount of time it takes to convince someone. Care and feeding. So how do you keep these teams going and positive and make sure my processes and the changes stay adopted, right? One of the things that we try to do is, especially when we're helping a customer change, is help them understand what a timeline is, a gate, and a milestone, right? And I'll just give you some, timeline is beginning to end. I start a change, investigate, we initiate the change, it's adopted, we report. Gates. So gates here deal with the idea that it's a specific requirement in a process change that's specific to that process. So if I want to optimize my receiving process and I need to identify, do I want to use a 2D barcode, and does that, what applications support that? That's a gate for that specific process because it doesn't really apply to things like replenishment, right? A milestone is something that would be standard in your change. So introduce the particular team to the change in process. That's a milestone, be a meeting or something. Talk about ROI. So keep return on investment as an executive calculation, right? Because you always have two choices on what you're going to do with that productivity lift. One of them is to reduce headcount. The other one is to do more with who you have, right? To stave off needing to hire. But that means you might have folks that are underutilized. So try to keep that away from the change team. I've seen it get pretty contentious, especially in things like union environments, where you talk about efficiency and it automatically in some union houses means that you're going to get rid of people. So ROI is something not to be discussed. We change things in order to become best of breed and faster. Executives deal with how ROI is handled. Does that make sense to everybody? Because it's kind of important. If you mix those missions, now you have people out on the floor that are taking away other people's jobs. It's a bad thing. Too much information and frequency deals with reporting, right? How do we keep this up and running? As executives and leaders, ask for the information you need in order to determine whether a process is successful. Be aware that a flippant remark in a meeting, right, or something you say under your breath that says, I wish I understood blah, if you have 6 people in the room, 2 of them are going to take that as a task and end up running on it even though you never assigned it, but they do want to please you and give you the information you need. So be thoughtful about the information you're requesting and how it's delivered, and then how often you want it. Make sense? You'll find that on these teams, if we're doing it, if we're picking that team right, a couple of those folks are our best and brightest, and they're already overworked because they're solving our most critical problems. So this is one of the ways you can make them more effective. And team turnover. This is tough, right? If you're managing people, especially in our industry, turnover is fairly frequent. Ideally, you want to pick your team with folks that are stable, have been there for a while, and you have a good working relationship with. If you have notices and terminations, you do have time to plan and replace folks on a team. I would say that you would probably, if the team is not actively engaged in a change and that person is not actively part of making that change successful, continue on without them. But if they are integral, now you have some different shoes to fill, right? It's grabbing another best and brightest, getting them up to speed, and helping pushing that adoption. Lost to priority, everyone has fires to put out. That means that at any given time, a good example is we're working with a customer that's going through some changes and had to conduct a product recall, and 2 of the people on on our change management team also needed to be part of going out and doing the research to understand where product was at that time. So you lose them for a couple of weeks, actually, as the root causes are being investigated. So the Chip Kelly offense, I don't know if you guys, beware of building a process that is so focused on individual and hard-to-find skill sets that given person, if they leave, cripples the entire team. So try to find things that can be spread around, identify redundancies, right? Make sub-teams. You know, you two folks are data crunchers for us, and if one leaves, you still have another one there. This part's important, goal setting and matrix management, right? When I stand up a team that is independent of any other department, I'm building for myself the potential for conflict between the leaders of those teams, right? Between the receiving lead and your initiative lead for receiving, butting heads over where a resource needs to be at a given time. So this requires us as leaders to help, excuse me, that was pretty interesting. Us as leaders to help promote, play nice together, right? Understand how a resource is dedicated and when. More importantly, though, is if it's really an organizational goal, then it belongs on those workers' goals. So within someone who's a receipt inspector, right, or a leader on the receiving team, that's also part of here, they should have goals that represent how you want them to progress in change management and on optimization, right? One of the things that we start out with before I turn it back over to Kirk is that it's difficult to give someone specific answers about how to optimize an operation without seeing it, right? I think that one of the things that's true about most folks in here is if we talk about receiving is truck backs in, I get some paperwork, I open it up, I do circle, sign, date, or scan, or whatever that is to identify the product coming in. Where optimization comes into play is us, right, a group in a detailed fashion looking at an operation and identifying the fat, right? If it's Lean Six Sigma, you're talking about waste. Theory of constraints, you're talking about a constraint. One of the things I shied away from is talking about how technology will solve all your problems, because depending on whatever process improvement you're using, technology is the last thing you do, right? Because we can approach a process, look at the speed that someone's working, understand labor management tools, and optimize what a person does way before we ever have to invest in an application. Does that make sense to folks? All right. I apologize. We have about 4 minutes, Kirk.
4 minutes. And so, yeah, just to piggyback on Don's last point there, we qualify a lot of people out before we even get into a WMS evaluation with them because they're just not ready for technology yet. They're at a point where it just doesn't make sense for them, and we don't want to waste their time, nor ours. But hopefully from today's conversation today, you took away some key points. If there are opportunities where you want to learn a little bit more about Snapfulfil and our WMS solution, we're back in the corner back there. We have some literature and brochure, and you can also find us on the website. So if you want to connect with us, take a picture of this. This is our email address, and we'll be happy to take questions.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Everybody's comatose, I'm sure, from the lunch, right?
I heard the folks over there, they were laughing and having a good time with the robot.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
sorry.
Good. How many in here have your own fulfillment center that you're shipping out of? Okay. Well, come talk to us and we'll learn a little bit more about your operation, see if there's anything that we can help you out with. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.